I realized that the only books I've talked about in recent months are the Just Kidding Rowling books that I was reading to one of my sons, and I haven't actually talked about the books I've been reading for myself. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to talk about what I'm currently reading and then talk about what's on my to-read list, at least a small part of my to-read list. So let's jump into it. So here's what I'm currently reading. I am working my way through the Mistborn trilogy by Brandon Sanderson. I'm about midway through book 2, which means I'm about midway through the entire trilogy, and so far it's been pretty good. I see why so many people say that the magic system in this series is just amazingly well developed. The story itself is fairly decent so far, so I'm definitely interested in seeing how it all wraps up as the series continues. Progress has been quite slow though, because my actual reading time happens at bedtime. When I get in bed, I do a bit of reading and then I go to sleep. And that typically means I only read a few pages and then I'm ready to go to sleep. And it's also competing with the time that I spend reading game rule books, so that's also the time that I do that. So I guess I've been working through this series for several weeks, a couple of months maybe, and I'm gradually going to get through it, and when I get to the end, I'll tell you all about it. When I do finish the Mistborn trilogy, I have next up a nonfiction book called Eating the Sun: How Plants Power the Planet by Oliver Morton. This one was forced upon me by one of my brothers because he knew I would love it, being a science nerd and all. But I expect that Eating the Sun is what I'm going to dive into once I get through the Mistborn trilogy. I have another nonfiction book that I started reading a couple of years ago. I got through a good chunk of it and then stalled out. Well, I guess I didn't even get quite halfway. But this is The Body Keeps the Score: Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma by Bessel van der Kolk. And this was given to me by somebody who heard about my PTSD diagnosis a couple of years ago. And I found it very informative and educational. And then I got to the chapter about childhood abuse and trauma. And I knew it was going to be a difficult part to get through. I was determined to power through it and carry on, but that didn't end up happening. I sort of got stalled there and set the book aside, and at some point in the near future, I really need to get back into it and finish up the rest of the book, because I'm sure there's a lot of interesting and important stuff that I should know as somebody who experiences complex PTSD from multiple sources. But getting back to the sciences now, one of my friends is a scientist who works for the Planetary Society and whose boss is actually Bill Nye the Science Guy, and he has given me a couple of books. He gave me E=mc², a biography of the world's most famous equation. It's interesting that they would do a biography of an equation rather than a person. I think there's some rather nasty stuff in Albert Einstein's biography, as absolutely mind-blowingly brilliant as he was, but I wonder what they have to say about this equation itself. So one thing that has interested me a lot in recent years is quantum mechanics or quantum physics. So I would be very interested to hear a classical physics perspective on E=mc². It might make for some interesting reading, or might be boring, who knows. The other one that he gave me is called Sputnik: The Launch of the Space Race by Paul Dixon. So that's more of a historical look at the race, I guess, between the US and Russia to get to space. So this one then would combine two of my major passions, which are science and history, and it could be quite an interesting read. Another book that was given to me somewhat randomly out of the blue by somebody I know only through the website BoardGameGeek.com, and this particular fellow asked for my address so he could send me his favorite book, and this one is called The Snow Leopard by Peter Matthiessen, and it is apparently a sort of non-fiction / philosophy book from what I understand, and it sounds like it could be kind of off the beaten path a little bit in terms of what I normally read, and thus is probably one that I should dive into and explore. And speaking of Board Game Geek, the funny thing is, I participated in this charity auction. Every year there's a charity auction run by the Jack Vassal Memorial Foundation, and people can submit mostly board games that they are willing to donate to the cause that can be auctioned off and the money given to the organization. This organization actually helped out myself and my family when we were in fairly dire straits not long after I had to go on disability. So it's an organization that means a lot to me, and I do participate in their auctions every year. And so this particular auction item was submitted by somebody on the website, and they were offering up a box o' books. So it was sort of a mystery box of books that they were donating. And I thought, I love mysteries. I love books. I love the charitable organization that was raising money. So I bid on it and won the item. Now, this item donor was not willing to ship outside the US. So I had this box of books shipped to somebody I know who lives in the US. And this box, I guess, at some point got lost in the shuffle, and I forgot about it over time. And then just recently, another mutual friend handed me this box and said, oh yeah, this other friend had brought it up from the US. They had found the box of things there with my name on it, and all of a sudden I found myself with this box of books that I bid on definitely more than a year ago. I don't know, I don't think it was more than 2 years ago, but I was actually trying to look it up on the website to see when this auction happened, and I kind of gave up, couldn't really find it very quickly. But it was a long time ago, and I got a whole bunch of books out of the blue. So I have a bunch of novels here that were part of this collection. I have Directive 51 by John Barnes. I have Pronto by Elmore Leonard. There's Open City by Teju Cole. There's a Stephen King novel called Joyland. Interestingly, the only Stephen King book I've ever read was his non-fiction book called On Writing, where he talked a little bit about his own autobiography in sort of a quick overview with the focus on his writing career, as well as his tips for aspiring writers. So I've never actually read one of his novels, but I have Joyland here. There's Juliet Naked by Nick Hornby, another novel. And then the final novel is In the Tennessee Country by Peter Taylor. Don't really know anything about any of these books, but that might make them all the more fun to just dive into and discover. There was also a single nonfiction book in the mix called Days of Rage, America's Radical Underground, the FBI, and the Forgotten Age of Revolutionary Violence by Brian Burrow. This one initially had me quite excited because as a person who has done my best to educate myself on these systems that sort of run our society, and thus as someone who's become quite despairing over the extremely unfair and broken machines that run our world, I was initially drawn to this idea of underground revolutionary stuff until I opened up the book jacket and read the FBI's response to the leftist revolutionary counterculture has not been treated kindly by history. And I was like, oh, so this is a defense of the FBI? Because when you really start digging into what the FBI has been involved with over the past several decades, it seems a little bit hard to defend what they have done. I don't know. I'm not sure if I'll end up reading it, but it could be interesting history regardless. Now, this last series of 4 books was a big surprise that I just received from the same brother who loaned me the book called Eating the Sun. This is a series of books he purchased for me, and this is Memoirs of Napoleon Bonaparte, volumes 1 through 4, and these were published in 1905. So this is quite a interesting thing to find myself the owner of. I'm very excited, as I said, being a big fan of history. I've done a little bit of reading on Napoleon. Speaking of, again, BoardGameGeek.com, I think it was on there that I found a history buff who had written this pretty much book-length series about Napoleon's generals, and I had gone to the link. I'd printed it all off onto printer paper, had this huge stack that I put into a binder, and read through a bunch of it, just talking about his generals. But here we have Napoleon's own memoirs. So I hadn't actually realized that Caesar-like he had kept these memoirs, and I am very curious to dive into these at some point. This is only a small collection of my actual reading list, but because they're largely things that have been given to me, I feel slightly more obliged to get them read sooner rather than later, I suppose. But if you are familiar with any of this stuff, I'd love to hear from you what I should check out, what I should maybe dive into sooner rather than later. Nothing's going to happen terribly soon, obviously, because I still have the Mistborn trilogy to get through before I get to anything else. And I'm always interested in hearing what other people are reading, so please do let me know. What are you currently reading? Is it a book that maybe I should add to my extensive to-read list? What in your own reading has been exciting you in recent weeks or months? I look forward to coming back to you with videos in the future about some or all of these books. And in the meantime, thanks so much for watching. Hey, it's Josh. You know why I'm here. Sometimes you just need that friendly reminder to give a little thumb up, to subscribe to the channel, to share the video with somebody who would enjoy it. Thanks so much for watching. Cheers. One, two, three, four, five, six, 7. It's been a long, slow. Once Nick Hornby, no.